Hi, I'm Subhadra. I am a yoga teacher, wellness coach, producer, mother of four, and the owner of Yoga Angels International. This is Strip to the Naked Truth podcast. You tell me why a Jamaican in those days always have a machete in the house? I guess it's supposed to be to protect their home. Now people have guns, I guess. He had a machete, and I'll never forget this machete. It curved with a little tip. It had like a curve, and it was fat and broad, and then the wooden end. But it was always placed in a place where that was, I guess, if someone robbed you. Now, why is in the middle of a party, my father has this machete hooked around my throat, and there is 30-something people in the party, and everybody paralyzed in fear? This is something I lived through. I can never forget that one, because here's what great came out of that incident. Remember, I said there was a lot of incidents. I chose to talk about the grape first, but there are so many that I have to say I prefer to focus on what I learned through the incident. How did I grow from them? And what part of me developed once you go through these kind of trauma? And then how you release them. That's really, but I have to tell you the story of the trauma, and I don't want anyone to internalize them. But in the middle of this party, in this particular incident, there was a machete hugged around my throat. It's the first time I became aware of what they call, I guess, your jugular. I remember they call it, because the tip of it was right in there. And when I looked around me and there was not one adult that was moving, they were in a circle around me. That vision will never leave my mind. I have released it many and many times, but I can always see the ring of people and just how paralyzed they were, because no one moved. Best they didn't, right? If a machete is around someone's throat, it's time for silence. And that was what the tension was so high. And I just remember something in my belly swelled, and I changed. I was going to go out in style. I tilted my head a tiny bit, and I looked up with my eyes, and I knew enough not to move my head too fast. And I met my father's eyes. And I remember him looking into mine and me looking into his. And I said, if you want to insult a Jamaican, you call them a pussy. I don't know if that's illegal to say that on YouTube, but that is what we do. The word pussy in Jamaica means you're a wimp, you are weak, and maybe like girl-like. So somewhat when you call a man that, or in Jamaica, they turn into a rage. But it also shows that you have courage, because how dare you call me that, knowing what it's going to bring out in me. Crazy psychological stuff, but truth. My choice was to draw courage and call my father and gave him a deer with a machete around my neck. That's the kind of courage I mustered up. Sounds stupid to me now that I'm saying it, but it doesn't matter. This is what happened. And I said, if you don't do it, you is a pussy. And my eyes locked into his, and he locked into mine. And whatever I was emanating in my eyes, it saved my life that day. And he looked into mine. He got soft. It's as if my power of my eyes diffused his intentions. And he said, you lucky you are my pitney. And you have to understand, though Jamaicans, there's a roughness and a gutturalness about us. But as guttural and rough as we are, is as sweet and gentle as we are as well. So something switched there, and I was there, courageous, ready. If this is it, this is it. But right now, hey, you're in the wrong. I don't understand how we got here, but if you don't do it, you're bluffing. But you know the term I use. And the machete just went down from my neck. And as if I went back in my body, and it was like, I didn't faint, but all I remember was a woman's hands was around me, and the room stopped from being frozen, and I was being led out of the room. And this woman was a woman called Nuled. She was from Barbados, and Nonel was the name, and Nonel grabbed me, and I ended up now being moved to a place called something Rocks. It was way upstate. If the name come back to me, I'll tell you where. And she lived up there, and I was taken to her house that night. That was traumatic. That was a trauma that I had to remove from my life with so much meditation, so much forgiveness, so much acceptance of the fact that I got courageous that day and I spoke when no one else in the room spoke. Maybe my choice of words were not so smart. I don't know. You can be the judge of that. But it got that machete released from my throat, and I was able to live sitting here talking to you, about to be 54 this year. So, in the instant of whatever this incident, how it had come about, because again, that was a party environment. Everybody was dancing, music was playing, and there was just a switch in this person's character that he had a machete around his child's neck, who he thought I was his child. What would bring something like that? If I can tell you now as a woman, the paternity fraud, my paternity father knew I was not his child subconsciously. It had been planted in him, and I think my face had grown into more of the face of my real father. And I think him seeing me every day and seeing my face, he knew somewhere in his gut, he knew I was not his child. And so what was this passionate love he had for me was starting to turn into this resentment. And I was so strong and powerful as a young person. I did not cower. I had so much, I don't know where it must have come from, that survival I had to do in Jamaica. I stood up for myself on every occasion that I fought back for my life force, is how I feel. I was fighting for my life, to not be beaten every day, to not be spoken to, the names I was called. Oh my God. Because the abuse was massive. Now, I either get crushed completely, my self-esteem was already, and I either was going to rise and find some strength. Funnily enough, my father just rang in. I cannot believe that. That's my real dad. That's ironic that my biological dad just called. And because the ringer on the phone is off, but if you know my dad, he can get through the channels. Anyway, now that he just called, it just reminded me to talk a little bit about the paternity fraud, and how at the base of so much of what I went through is this origin of how I came into the planet. And my biological father, basically, I found out about him at age 35, right? I spoken about that in the incident episode. So how I came about knowing about it was the craziest incident where my auntie had visited my biological sister, who I know nothing about at that time, and she lived in Brooklyn. So, but my auntie knew her, because remember, my biological father is the biological father of my two siblings. So we knew he was around. It's just, and their family member had connection. I just knew nothing about him nor his family. But as my aunt visited my oldest sister, which is my biological father's daughter, first daughter, she saw a little young girl walking out the room who looked exactly like me, who was literally the daughter of my sister, which would be my niece, who I have no idea about at the time. But she looked so much like me that my auntie questioned my sister and said, I don't understand how Anika could look so much like hold on, my headset just came out. How she can look so much like, remember they called me Donna. So, who looked just like Donna. It confused my aunt. And just this one statement crashed 35 years worth of secrecy. One sentence from my auntie, because my sister turned to her and said, how are you talking about? Then Donna no bone and pitney. And my auntie said, no, I don't understand what you mean. Donna is, my biological father's name is Griffiths. It's Griffiths' daughter. And my sister said, oh no, she's not. Your sister has three children from my father. In those days, secrecy was big, okay? In our family, there was just ton of secrets. Everybody knew that my two sisters was my biological father's children. They just didn't know I'm the only one who had this paternity fraud. I'm the only one because I was that third child that's coming out of this family of marriage already. Remember, my father was already married. He already had a wife and children. Another common thing in Jamaica where the men, they have the wife and then the girlfriend. More of the African heritage. The only difference in Africa, they could marry many women. In Jamaica, we're still under the Christian law that they can have a wife, but the men, they're living more African. If you ask me, they have a wife, a girlfriend, the girlfriend, and they have their series of women. In my father's case, he had his wife and family, and he had those children, and then ended up having three children with my mother, who was, again, she was a young girl. She had her first child for him at 17. She had a second child for him at about 18 and a half. And then she had me at 20. That's a lot for one young girl to deal with. And the fact that this man is not even her husband, he is someone else's husband. But my father was a bold man because he even had my mother in the house with his wife. Oh yeah, bold stuff. The phone call I just got is from my biological father. He's still alive. My paternity fraud father is dead. He drank himself to death eventually. That is just unfortunately what took him out was is alcoholism and cigarette smoking. Eventually, he passed away. But my biological father is currently alive and doing very well. He's 87 years old, and I have an amazing relationship with him. From getting to know him at 35, I have kept very close relationship with him. With my siblings, I've rekindled with all my siblings. That is from his wife. I love his wife. His wife met me. She told me, I think you were conceived in my bed. She told me that with her own mouth. And I thought, wow, you're an angel. And she said, well, this was the times. And again, you learn that each generation, we're served what we're served. Right here is the time to understand forgiveness and to understand that we are constantly growing, but you come out of a generation of people who had their own sense of abuse, their own sense of challenges, their own sense of different things that was placed upon their time before. In other words, the parenting is, we talked about this before, where all the four parenting seems to accumulate and come together in the next generation of parenting. So you're going to get a bit of what I got, a bit of what my father was able to evolve and bring to a different level. I am now evolving it and bringing it to another level. And the whole time we're all working for the same thing, evolution of bringing forth better children, better circumstances, better communication. I feel like my children was able to get better communication because of the lack of grace that my other, let's say, paternity fraud dad had, right? He had alcoholism. There's no way to get around that. Alcoholism, any ism, has an effect on our mechanism, our system, right? And it changes your brain waves. It changes your brain waves and you end up being aggressive. It peers on the more fight or flight. Remember, we talk about the chakras, first, second, third, fifth, sixth, all the way up to the seventh. Well, those chakras are being disturbed when we are drinking too much, when we get emotional imbalances. That's what I was experiencing from my paternity fraud dad. My Biological dad, his life went a different direction. He doesn't have alcoholism. He's much more of a spiritual. You're looking at my father. I'm sitting here in front of you. My biological father and I are so close in essence. It's scary because he never raised me. He never raised me. Yet, by the time he met me, he knew. He said, "Oh my God, I thought you were a boy." And I said, "What on earth does that mean?" And he explained to me that out of his, it's like Abraham, out of his 18 kids he has, right? He was always looking for what he calls the spirit that was going to be like the carrying on of his mother. He traced it back to his mother. He said his mother had a spirit like mine, and that his mom, he then ended up with that kind of spirit, and he was looking to find it within his 18 children, but he thought it was coming in a boy because the way he just imagined it in a boy. And then he met me and he said, "Oh my God, so you are the one who have the spirit, that spirit I've been looking for." You know, we have a lot of these spiritual, I guess you can say, I don't know if you can say it's superstition, because it's probably, I think it's more a lineage and the old way of how we did things. You felt the spirit, you knew the spirit carry on into the next spirit, if you can believe that's how those things happen. That's what my father was saying, that I was what they call the anointed one, right? In the church, they said you are anointed. For instance, I had clairvoyancy from I was a little girl. These things, I couldn't make them up myself. They were just something that emanated from within me. I was discovering these things. I didn't know they exist. It's just as I grew into a womanhood, instead of hiding and running away from them now, there was ways I could educate myself around these different things that naturally happened to me. So now it made sense. Oh, so what my father was calling the spirit was these capacity, and in yoga we call it siddhis, which you're able to go beyond just the physical external realm of what the 3D dimension, and you can go and tap into, and everyone has this potential. It's just how many people allow themselves to strip down to their naked truth, to find that truth within themselves, to discover that supernatural way of us radiating our energy into the different existence of life, right? So bringing it back now to him being my biological father, finding that common trait of spirituality. He has energy about him. When he walks into a room, you can feel it, boom. It's a groundedness. And, his language always is about God. That man could recite the Bible from beginning to end in so many ways to tell you about. That's the way he went. And my other father went the alcoholism way, where he was more the drinker, the smoker of cigarette. And so he has passed on. God bless his soul and rest him in peace, as we all deserve that. And even one quick second about my dad, my paternity dad. I recognize all the aspects of me that came from him. My sensitivity is from that dad. He was the most sensitive creature. But in order to protect that sensitivity, he turned to the wrong substance. That was what the drinking was about. That was what the anger was about, you see. When he flared up and he destroyed things around him. Remember, I spoke about anger once, and I said we should always feel our anger. We just need to process it without becoming dangerous. My father didn't do that. My father used the substance which appeared on his lower chakra, his fight or flight, and brought him into danger zone. So instead of being able to curtail his energy inward and express himself in a nice and conscious way, he did it in violence and anger. That's not uncommon for alcoholism traits. I think that's something we have to tie in there. And I ended up with some of that. So I had to live through that and work through that and know how to then take that anger and not process it outward, but to bring it and polish it, move my body, take it out of my cells, take it out of my bloodstream. Today we did twists. I churned my anger out of my blood. I took it out. I took it from my dietary area as well. The way I eat helped me to dissolve that out of my system. I don't eat certain food that's going to make me toxic and angry. I make sure meat is one of them. That meat has violence in it. Now, many people are going to disagree. That's okay. But every time I ate pork and chicken and all these other food kind, I would remember feeling that anger in my blood. 7 years after giving it up, I think I mentioned that before, I felt it seep out of my fingertips, watching my hands shake as anger left my bloodstream. And from there, I just felt more and more peaceful. I continued my practice. I dug deep. I meditated more. I held myself to high esteem that I didn't want it around me. But today, do you think anger has left? Anger comes up and seduces you every day. You know, it comes in some form or another. It could be when you're on the freeway and you're flipping people off, or in the time you get so upset you start to talk to your spouse with disgust. These are still anger coming up in, I call it when it changes clothes. It just changes outfit and it comes up in a subtle way. I have a goal for myself that when I'm done polishing this diamond I am, that anger cannot enter my I am. That I will be so pristine and refined that when anger comes and tries to seduce me, I will be saying, hello, here is peace. This is how I choose to emanate my energy. I don't want anger in my life. And I believe that you can dance with it by changing it, churning it, turning it into peace, tranquility. I've done it many times, so I know it's possible. I'm just saying I want it all the time. I want it all the time. It's the same way I'm a vegetarian all the time. I'm not getting up today and saying I'm a vegetarian. 29 years ago, when I became a vegetarian, I didn't stop in between and say, today I'm going to flirt with meat. No, I stayed vegetarian. I am asking my I am to be so polished that when anger knock on my door, I can invite it to peace. I can churn it and turn it like rumpin still and still and turn it into another way of expressing myself. Wish me the best of success on my journey, because I know what I'm saying to you are the big boss alchemist move. Big boss alchemist move. And that's how I want to live. I must be honest with you. I haven't attained it yet. I have incidents I can tell you about in this age of my age that has shown me, not yet, little girl, you have lots more to learn. But I tell you what, I catch it every time and I milk it and I churn it and I said, I'm going to get better. Every time you come, I'm going to let you know I am the boss. I get to determine how I emote in this body and how I put my footprints into the earth. However, the warrior woman, she's not gone. I don't want people to get it wrong, that I could be pissed upon. No, 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 no. There is a way, a balance there that I still believe I will fight for my breath. But it will be only under that cost. So to explain a bit more about the dynamics of my paternity father and my biological father. The paternity father, though I thought he was my biological father, he has another child with my mom, which is my youngest sibling. We had 4 siblings. The 2 sisters who are older than me, they are for my biological dad, who I know is my biological dad today. So in our household, it looked like my 2 sisters was my half-sister. But truly, we were one father. And then my brother, he was the only one that would truly biologically belong to who I thought was my biological father. But he wasn't. He was a paternity fraud case. So my other 2 sisters, they knew they shared a father. But the truth is, I also shared the same father with them. And only my brother, he was the one that was from my mother's new boyfriend, who is who was told that I was his child. So he thought I was his first child. And then my mom had the boy, which is my brother, for him. And so he thought he had two children with my mother, but technically he had one child, which was the son. He just came in at such an early age when my mom was pregnant with I was already conceived from my biological father, and my mom shifted into that relationship she was already consummating the relationship with him. She to herself did not know which one it could be, because she had already mated with my biological father, like say 2 weeks ago, and now she mated with her new boyfriend who she had met or a month, within that space. That child is now, it could be for either guy. So she thought, well, it's going to be it's Alvin. But she had no proof. She couldn't really say which one I was for. I took the time when I was 27, to speak to my father and listen to his life story. And when I listened to his life story, I understood why he was the way he is and what he was numbing with alcoholism. He was numbing the pain of how they treated him, and the way he said it, like a dog. They would tie him to a tree and they would beat him. We have to remember, slavery made an impact. It made an impact upon all of us. Whether you were white or you were black, it made an impact. And this is how humans were relating. So that beating my father would get, being tied to a tree and having to walk from St. Anne all the way to Kingston to barefoot to make a living, selling this, selling that. These things matter, because what I'm getting is the lesser version of that in my family tree, is what I'm saying. And what my kids are getting is the lesser version of that. And so each of us have a responsibility to clear up the generation, as I said before, to erase and make space for new behavior patterns. So my father being tied to a tree, we weren't tied to a tree, but he was whooped for hours being tied to a tree. You can't get away when you're tied to a tree. That's a trapped animal being whooped. This is what you call absolute abuse. Well, I got the lesser version. I wasn't to a tree, but I was getting those whooping the same way he had gotten it. But what about his parents? They probably got it through the slave master, didn't they? So what I'm saying is, you must remember that violence is a disease. It's a disease. It is placed upon us, and we must have the strength to say no, no more, no more. And you don't bring it over in your household. And if you find yourself bring it over in your household, command yourself once again. That's what I do. You can't live here. You can't live here. This is my home. This is my home in the sense of my skin suit and temporal body. And I don't want you to come through my veins. You have no permission to live here. And you cannot come through my veins and use my hands to create more mayhem in my home. I don't want to be hit by anyone, and I don't want to hit anyone, you see. But when I grew up, I knew that to be not so. I knew you fight, you hit each other, you fight for your life, Look how far I have to come away from that. I remember something my father said. This was a mantra that was programmed in me. Watch the mantras that's being programmed in you and change them. He said to me, this is the paternity fraud, Dad. When anybody lick you, make people lick you, And if them lick you and you bleed, I'll tell you in English soon. If them lick you and you bleed, you have to kill them. Say what? This is what you teach a child? Them have to dead. Now, I say this to you to know that this is still going on in our country, whether it's rural. And this violence is something that has to stop. And it cannot be programming children. It should not. Teach them about peace. Teach them about love. Tell them the courage they have to move away from violence. Tell them that they're powerful enough that they don't ever have to hurt themselves or anyone else. Why? Why would you tell someone they have to kill someone? As a child, however, when someone is programming you that if you can't learn to fight for your life, that you won't be able to have that birthright, where did he learn that? Where did that start from? And we can rewind and we know where that came from, right? We don't have to fight in this way anymore. We really don't. But we can talk it over. We can communicate. The power of speech is so much more powerful than it is, which is why I chose to take my power and sit myself down and speak my truth. Because I will rather use communication, verbal communication, for healing than I would want to fight my way. And if someone makes me bleed, you know, when I got to drop that, I remember when I finally understood that that was not okay to think. I was 20, pretty much 8 years old. Because if I followed that mantra and I kept it programmed in my psyche, where would I be today? You and I already know. You can only imagine. I would not be sitting here asking for the world to come to peace. No, that's not where, that would have trajected me to something completely different than this. But it came to a critical point in my life where that mantra was leading me. And when someone, no matter how much I would claim ahimsa means non-violence. I would pledge to it. I would meditate. I was becoming more and more peaceful through the years. I saw it. I was no longer just, I became panther-like. I swear, these stories are crazy. I remember being so panther-like in my fight or flight. In the middle of a gym, someone disturbed my balance, quote unquote. The desk, I leaped on the desk like I was an animal. It was a Russian guy. He never seen anything like me. He was not prepared for me. I'm laughing because I see myself in those days and I was ripped and strong, you know. The way I leaped on that counter, that is an animal mode we go into. It's a good thing to have for protection, not to deal with everyday circumstances. No, definitely not. These were my reality. And I had to take all of that energy and conjure it into more productive pursuits. That is my invitation to everybody who feel this major rush through their veins. Use it for making money, using it for becoming healthy. Put that energy and direct it into creating something you want to live, because that's what I'm trying to do with mine. Therefore, I say to you that energy can be processed, reprocessed, and be used to create anything we desire. Me, there's only a few things I desire in the world. I definitely desire to be peaceful. I have that down pat. I'm not going to lie, I'm a peaceful woman. But of course, I still have to watch the triggers because I'm still in the skin suit. So therefore, I'm probably one of those people don't want to run up onto, you know, because that animal instinct is still in there. But I control my destiny. I decide how it comes out of my body. We'll get into other story when I was tested and how I handle myself. Some of them I pass, some of them I fail. Oh my God. And some of them, I just move out of it, navigate my way, and remain in my stance of peace. Ahimsa, nonviolence, doesn't just mean fighting physicality. It means nonviolence of your speech, nonviolence of the way you treat people around you. It really means kindness and being absolutely first kind to you. Because what we push out of ourselves onto others is usually how we're feeling within. That is how we end up displacing on other people. Because if we don't feel good, you notice those are the days when you're the least capable of really transmuting and emoting in a very positive way. It's usually when you yourself is off balance, when things are not going as you think it should in your life, and when you're not handling those things by meditating and balancing out yourself. So these past stories, as I share with you, of how I was losing my energy, and instead of bringing it together and making it into a nice patty cake, a cake that could feed me nutritiously, obviously that's a metaphor, but the point is that we can take that energy. I can take that energy and release. I think we're looking for endorphins when we do that, by the way. These explosions human goes through, we're looking for the release of endorphins. Go work out. Go to the gym. Do yoga. Let us do these things instead and do enough of it so that you can make yourself at ease. This way, when we're dealing with people and we find ourselves coming to that short fuse, we can check the gauge, you know. I now can feel when my stuff is billing, and then it's like, okay, yoga mat time, baby. I want to release that on the mat, put my head in a child's pose, instead of turning into a raging beast. And remember, everything we do affects the hemisphere. It affects the world. We're that powerful. We're that powerful. Each of us matter. What I do change the entire frequency around me and within the entire world. We are connected. We're one unit. I know it seems like we're separate, but we're really not. We're one unit. And in a household, when the household go off balance, when my father would go off balance, the paternity father, right? When he would go off balance, everybody would be completely turned out. Sadness. It was always airy, and the police would be called sometimes, and it just was this dark cast of energy over our family. You don't just affect one person, yourself. You affect everything and everyone around you. I don't want to be that charge. I want to be the positive charge in a room. And that's what I command of myself. So every time I enter a room, I like to sail in with a bit of a, hey, I'm here. The I am is here. Not a personality, but the divine being that I was meant to be on this planet. And that's the only thing I would pull up a fight for. I will fight to remain divine. No doubt. No doubt. And I will fight to keep my body alive, because that was the gift that was given to me by God. And so, yes, for protection. But outside of that, no, my emotions are mine to reign in and to use and utilize in grace, peace, mercy, joy. And all those family members, those friends can come in for the party. So on to our next episode. Coming up in our next episode, you'll find out how I went from a 16-year-old on the streets in America to becoming a corporate bank teller, then becoming a stripper. Yes, from corporate suits to stripper nude. And how did that come about to me being here 29 years of yoga and wellness? So, until next time, when you continue to strip down to your naked truth, I'm Subhadra. Namaste.